I woke to a faint mechanical hum, the sterile scent of antiseptic, and a ceiling I didn't recognize. For a moment, my mind floated somewhere between sleep and memory, clinging to fragments of a world that no longer existed. Then the pain arrived, sharp, deep, blooming behind my ribs like something splitting open from within. Real, heavy, unforgiving. I wasn't dreaming. I wasn't safe. And I wasn't alone, except I was no father leaning forward in a chair. No brother pretending to care. No stepmother arranging her expression into something that resembled empathy, just a room full of machines quietly, insisting I was alive, and a note. A single folded note sitting neatly on the tray beside my bed, placed with the same cold precision that defined my family. I reached for it with trembling fingers, feeling the four tug lightly at my hand. 5 words. 5 devastating, ordinary, monstrous words. We stopped paying. Good luck. My father's handwriting, sharp, controlled, detached, for a long moment. The world disappeared into a ringing void. My breath hitched. My chest tightened. And a sob rose so quietly that even the machines didn't register it. I hadn't cried that softly since I was a child, back when I learned loud sadness only made things worse in my house. I stared at those 5 words until they blurred into streaks of blackened paper. They weren't just a sentence. They were a verdict. A sentence passed against me by the man who was supposed to love me first. A nurse entered, eventually, soft eyes. Gentle voice, practiced warmth, and told me with quiet sympathy, "You were in a coma, Caroline. 3 months. 3 months. The world had lived, breathed, celebrated, argued, mourned, and my father had found time to sign me away." She said more. I barely heard it. My body felt like it belonged to gravity and pain. My mind drifted to places I tried not to remember. Silence. I grew up in a home where silence didn't mean peace. It meant danger. It meant punishment delivered without yelling. It meant Veronica, my stepmother, placing invisible walls between us, shutting doors gently but decisively, withdrawing affection like oxygen. My father absorbed her habits the way he absorbed business strategies, fully, eagerly. Without question, my brother Landon mimicked them like a mirror, learning early that ignoring me brought rewards. Reflecting Veronica's coldness brought praise. I learned the opposite lesson. I filled the silence. With work, with effort. With excellence no one saw. 15 years of building the systems my father's company ran on. 15 years ghostwriting the proposals Landon presented. 15 years creating the architecture they claimed as family innovation. Meanwhile, my office was a converted storage room on the lower floor. Flickering lights. No windows. A chair that leaned like it was tired of holding someone so invisible, and I accepted it because I told myself the same lie my mother whispered to me before she died. Good work speaks for itself. It didn't. Not in my family. I blinked back into the hospital room. The note still clutched weakly in my hand. My ribs screamed when I shifted, but there was a new ache. Now deeper, wider, heavier. My mother. If she were still alive, none of this would have happened. She had seen this long before I did, this slow erasing of my existence. I remembered her long nights in her study with Daniel Price, her estate lawyer, whispered conversations, sealed envelopes. A seriousness I was too young to understand. Maybe she saw what would happen the moment she was gone. A soft click pulled me back. The door creaked open, and for a heartbeat, something inside me brightened foolishly. Stupidly expecting my father, it wasn't him. It was Daniel. Older now. A little thinner, but still carrying the same careful sincerity in his posture. He stepped inside with a gentleness that made my throat burn. Behind him stood a man I didn't recognize, tall, sharply dressed. Posture straight enough to suggest he evaluated every room he ever walked into. Daniel's voice was soft, steady. "Caroline, I'm glad you're awake. We not your family? Not your father asked about you. Just we. Daniel and this stranger whose presence felt intentional, urgent. I forced out a whisper. Where's my family? They exchanged a look, a heavy one, a confirming one. No one spoke, and I finally understood. I wasn't abandoned by accident. I was abandoned by design. Daniel cleared his throat as the stranger stepped forward. "Caroline," Daniel said. "This is Ethan Ward. He's been advising me on matters related to your mother's estate." Ethan nodded politely, but didn't waste time. His voice carried the steady tension of someone arriving with news that couldn't wait. "The next 72 hours," he said, "will determine the rest of your life." My pulse stumbled. My life. Daniel opened a folder, thin, precise, devastating. "Your father," he said quietly, "is preparing a restructuring. The board meets in 3 days. As of this morning, he has filed documents declaring you permanently mentally incompetent." I stared at him, the room. Tilted dot, permanently incompetent. Erased. Ethan's voice cut through the rising panic like a blade, but he made a mistake. Daniel nodded. "A mistake your mother anticipated years ago." He opened the folder fully, now papers resurfacing like ghosts. My mother's handwriting curled delicately at the bottom of one page. A trust, a clause, a condition triggered by abandonment during medical incapacitation. Ethan met my eyes. "Your father walked away," he said. "And with that note, those 5 words, he activated everything your mother left behind for you." A spark lit inside my bruised body, small but fierce. I wasn't powerless. I'd just been asleep. Asterisk. The suite overlooked downtown San Francisco, its glass windows stretching from floor to ceiling like a quiet witness to the chaos unfolding inside. From the 41st floor, the city looked like a living map, lights blinking. Cars threading through intersections. People rushing toward places they believed mattered. Meanwhile, I sat on the edge of a hotel bed, trying to remember how to breathe with ribs that felt half broken and a heart that felt fully shattered. Ethan stood at the work table. Sleeves rolled up, laptop open, fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced precision. The glow from the screen lit his jawline and captured the sharp angles of his face. Calm, controlled, focused. He had the expression of a man who had already calculated the next 5 moves. "The way you study a chessboard after realizing your opponent thinks you're weak." Daniel sat in an armchair beside me, scribbling notes, organizing documents, taking calls with the hushed urgency of someone who'd stepped into a war he'd been preparing for but never hoped to fight. I watched them, both men working quietly around me, carrying the weight my father had tried to bury it. It hit me then hard, unexpected. Painful that these two believed in me more than the people who had raised me. The thought forced a shiver up my spine. "Carolyn," Ethan said, not looking away from the screen, "I'm pulling up every internal access log from the last 5 years. If they removed your digital footprint, we'll find the pattern." "They did remove it," I said softly. "Piece by piece, project by project." My voice caught. Every time Landon presented something I built, they signed the credit to him before the meeting even ended. Ethan finally looked up. His expression didn't soften, but his eyes did. "Then tonight," he said, "we start taking it back. All of it." The words were simple, but the conviction behind them wasn't. It stirred something in me. Something that had been quiet for years, anger mixed with clarity. Grief braided with determination. Daniel cleared his throat gently. "Your father underestimated the one person your mother trusted most. She prepared for this, Carolyn. She left you everything you need." He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a slim leather binder. When he opened it, the faint smell of old paper drifted into the air, the scent of something protected. Preserved. My mother's handwriting covered the first page like a whisper from the past. "If you are reading this, it means the protection I built for you has activated." My chest tightened. She had known I could not stop the people who diminish you, but I can make sure they never erase you. My vision blurred. My mother had planned for a future. She feared she wouldn't be part of a future where I would be alone. A future where the people she once trusted would see me as an inconvenience. Ethan's voice cut through my spiraling thoughts. "There's something else," he said. Turning the laptop toward me, lines of code scrolled across the screen: timestamps, contribution logs, metadata entries. Rows and rows of digital fingerprints. Mine. Hundreds of project files showed my initials buried deep within their structure. Scripts I had written. Frameworks I had built. Infrastructure I held together with sheer force of will. But every published report bore Landon's name. Every board presentation carried my father's signature. Ethan tapped the screen. They hid your contributions, but they didn't know where to look. You built too deeply. You built too intricately. They couldn't remove you without breaking the system. Daniel exhaled sharply. Your mother must have known you'd do that. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. I never meant to hide it. It was just work. It was easier to finish things than argue. Easier, Ethan repeated, but not right. His tone wasn't judgment, it was recognition. The way someone speaks when they understand exactly what it means to disappear for the comfort of others. Daniel took a breath. The board meets in 72 hours. Your father plans to declare you permanently unfit. If he does, you lose everything. Even the trust won't protect your position if the board believes him. A spike of panic shot through my chest. I'm not ready for a boardroom. I can't even stand without help. You don't need to stand, Ethan said. You need to be undeniable. The words settled on my skin like armor. Undeniable, unshakable, unerasable. A low vibration hummed from Ethan's laptop. He leaned forward, studying the screen. I've accessed Richard's private drive, he said, voice tightening. And Caroline. He's been preparing this restructuring for months. Long before your accident. The room stilled. Months. I whispered. Before the coma. Ethan nodded. He's planned your removal for years. The accident just made it easier. My stomach twisted. Whatever hope remained inside me withered. My father hadn't panicked. He hadn't made an emotional choice. He waited. He watched. He calculated. And the moment I fell unconscious, eliminated me. Daniel placed a hand gently on my arm. Your mother knew he'd eventually choose power over loyalty. I didn't want to believe she was right, I whispered. But she was, Ethan said. And she planned around him every step of the way. He reached into his jacket and placed something on the nightstand. My security badge. My photo. My name. A clearance level I had never seen before. Your mother created this, Ethan said. She gave you full authorization over infrastructure, research, development, strategy, everything Landon claimed. She designed the company so you could enter any division without permission. I touched the badge with trembling fingers. A surge of heat rushed through my chest pain. Pride, grief, power. This, Ethan murmured, is everything your father didn't want you to have. For a long moment, the three of us sat in silence. Not the cold silence of my childhood. Not the punishing, empty silence of the hospital. A new kind of silence. A gathering one. A sharpening one. It wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. Ethan finally spoke again. You need evidence. Proof of contribution. Proof of concealment. Proof of abandonment during incapacity. Proof that your father acted maliciously. And you'll help me get it. I asked softly. Ethan didn't even blink. We're already getting it. Daniel nodded. You're not fighting alone. I exhaled, slow, shaky. The first real breath I'd taken since waking up. Then, let's begin. I said, because this wasn't the story of a girl erased. It was the story of a woman waking up. And nothing in my father's world was ready for that. Asterisk. The suite transformed overnight. What had been a quiet hotel room overlooking San Francisco became something else entirely. A war room. A sanctuary. A battlefield disguised beneath glass walls and soft carpet. Sticky notes lined the tables. Printed logs covered the armchairs. Diagrams crossed the windows, like constellations drawn by someone. It's trying to map a universe out of betrayal. And in the middle of it all sat Ethan's laptop, humming with the eerie glow of secrets unraveling. I remained propped against pillows, half upright, half exhausted, but more awake than I'd felt in years. Pain still radiated through my ribs. But a different kind of ache now lived inside me, an ache sharpened into purpose. "Caroline," Ethan said without looking up, "your father restricted your back-end access 3 years ago." That's when the erasure began. He clicked another file. Another project. Another contribution stripped of my name. Daniel stood at the minibar counter, sorting through papers with the same steady hands I remembered from my childhood. Hands that delivered my mother's legal documents. Hands that stayed calm while everything else in my life cracked open. He lifted a page. "This is the first documented removal," he said softly. "A framework I wrote, signed under Landon's name." My throat tightened. He didn't even know how to read the architecture. No, Ethan said, but he knew how to steal from the person who did. Daniel glanced at the digital timeline projected across the TV screen. "Your father waited until you were vulnerable. Once you were unconscious, he accelerated everything. And he didn't expect you to wake up," Ethan added quietly. Those words lodged. Deep down, my father never planned for my recovery. He planned around my absence. He had declared me mentally incompetent while I was still breathing. He had eliminated my access. He had erased my identity within the company I helped build. But the one thing he hadn't counted on, the thing he couldn't erase, was the woman my mother prepared me to become. I inhaled slowly, grounding myself. "We need to build a case," Daniel said. "One the board can't ignore. One that makes Richard's actions impossible to justify." "And we need leverage," Ethan added. "Undeniable proof your father's leadership is compromised." He glanced toward me with a sharpness that felt like alignment, not threat. "I know you're hurt," he said. "I know you're tired. But the next 3 days are everything." I nodded. "Tell me what to do." Ethan pulled a rolling chair closer to the bed, then turned the laptop so I could see the screen. "First, we compile all digital evidence showing your authorship." He pointed at blocks of code highlighted in blue. "These metadata tags, they're your fingerprint. No one else writes like this. Your mother told me once your syntax pattern is unique." A warmth flickered in my chest, small, painful, almost shy. "She said that?" I whispered. Daniel nodded. "She believed in your mind more than anyone else ever did." I blinked away tears before they had the chance to fall. Ethan continued. "Next, we gather every instance where they used your work publicly but credited someone else. We match timestamps, meeting logs, presentation archives." He turned back to the laptop. "We're creating a timeline they can't manipulate." "And the abandonment?" I asked quietly. Daniel lifted the folded note, those 5 words that broke and rebuilt my world. "That," said, "is your mother's trigger clause. It's legally airtight. Once it's presented, everything your father controls through her estate shifts to you and the board." My voice trembled, but my resolve didn't. "You won't be asking for power," Ethan said. "You'll be exercising it." The weight of that settled over me. Heavy, terrifying, real. "You're not the girl in the windowless office anymore," Daniel said gently. "You're the rightful heir." Swallowed hard. "Then let's take back what they stole." Hours passed. Coffee cups stacked. The city darkened, brightened. Darkened again. Ethan moved like a strategist, tracing enemy lines calm, ruthless, focused. Daniel handled legal coordination, calling board members privately, preparing affidavits, ensuring every document was bulletproof. As they worked, I sifted through pieces of my own life, emails I'd written at 2 a.m., drafts I'd built during holidays my family spent celebrating without me, code I wrote when the world outside was asleep. And slowly, painfully, truth reshaped itself into something undeniable. My entire value, the thing my father, my stepmother, and my brother exploited for years, had been hiding in plain sight. I had been the backbone, the architect, the engine they had never built around me. They had built on top of me, and now they would face the cost of that choice. At midnight, Daniel paused his work. "We need someone inside the building," he said. "Someone who can verify your presence over the years." Almost as if summoned. Ethan's computer pinged. He leaned forward, brows lowering. Scanning something on the screen, the corner of his mouth lifted barely sharply. "What?" I asked. "We have a witness." The next morning, a knock sounded at the suite door. Ethan answered it. A tall man in a navy uniform stepped inside, broad shoulders, worn hands, posture proud but humble. His badge read Martin Cole, head of security. "Mercer Technology." "I got Daniel's message," he said, nodding respectfully toward me. "And I brought something you might need." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small weathered notebook. "I work nights," he said. "For years I saw you in the building. You'd arrive before dawn, leave after midnight. Most people didn't notice." He placed the notebook on the bed. I did. I opened it with hesitant fingers. Inside dates, times, notes. Records of me working late, entering server rooms, attending uncredited meetings. Patching infrastructure failures. Landon bragged about fixing. Page after page of proof that I existed, that I worked, that I mattered. "Why did you keep this?" I whispered. He shrugged, eyes softening. "Because my wife works under you in R&D. She always said the company would fall apart without you. I figured someday the truth might matter." It mattered now, more than he could ever know. I closed the notebook gently. "Thank you. Make them see you," he said. "Some of us already do." When Martin left, Ethan exhaled slowly. "This is it, Carolyn. This notebook alone could turn the board." But combined with everything else, Daniel added, "It's the end of Richard's empire." Ethan finished. I felt my pulse steady, not from fear, from readiness. "Tomorrow," Ethan said, "your father will walk onto that stage thinking he's won." Daniel met my eye. He has no idea what's coming, and for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of silence. I was preparing to break it. The morning of the summit felt unreal, like the city had slowed itself for what was coming. San Francisco was wrapped in a thin gray fog, the kind that blurred buildings and softened a jest, but nothing could soften what waited inside the Grand Pavilion. Not for me, not for my father, not for the family that once left me in a hospital bed with 5 words and no goodbye. Ethan helped me into the black tailored coat he'd brought hours earlier. It wasn't armor, but it felt like it. The fabric settled across my shoulders with unfamiliar weight, authority, expectation, inheritance. "You good?" Ethan asked quietly. I nodded, though my ribs still ached and my breath caught too easily. Strength didn't feel like something inside me. It felt like something I was borrowing from the past. "Good enough," I said. Daniel tightened the strap of his briefcase. "Then remember one thing," he murmured. "They will try to minimize you the moment they see you. Do not let their shock turn into control." Shock. Yes. I imagined it, my father on stage, perfectly crafted smile, rehearsed announcement, ego polished like glass. And then me walking out from the shadows like a ghost he thought he buried. I wasn't afraid of the confrontation. I was afraid of how much. I'd once wanted his approval, but today wasn't. About him. Today was about the truth. Finally having a microphone. Ethan tapped the elevator button. "Once we walk through those doors," he said, "you'll need to hold the room. Not with volume, with certainty." "Spent my whole life being silent," I said. "It won't be hard to do it loudly." He smirked, not playful, but proud. Asterisk, the elevator doors closed. And the mirrored walls reflected the 3 of us, Daniel composed and steady, Ethan sharp with intention, and me, a woman who had been erased, but was no longer willing to stay invisible. My hands trembled slightly, not from fear, from recognition. I waited years for this moment. Even if I hadn't known it, the elevator opened to the mezzanine level, where executives streamed toward the main hall in wavesuits. Lanyards, badges flashing with company logos. Conversations buzzed around us about keynote predictions, market projections, leadership announcements. Leadership announcements, if only they knew. We moved through them unnoticed. The way I'd moved through this company most of my life. But as we neared the auditorium doors, security guards stepped directly into our path. Not to block us to deliver something. Miss Mercer, he said, glancing at Daniel for confirmation. My name is Martin Cole's deputy. Mr. Cole asked me to give you this. He handed me a slim envelope. Inside, a printed record of my entries into the server wing over the last decade. Hundreds of timestamps. Hundreds of late nights and early mornings only a few people ever saw. He leaned in. Everyone on the night shift knows who's been keeping this place running. My throat tightened. I swallowed, nodded, and whispered, "Thank you." He stepped aside. "Go show them." And we continued. The ballroom was massive crystal lights reflecting off polished floors. Rows of white seats filled with people who once walked past me without a glance. On stage, my father stood at the podium wearing the smile he reserved for cameras and shareholders. Veronica sat in the front row, poise flawless. Landon hovered near the stage steps, practicing his expression in the reflection of the teleprompter. I slipped behind the side curtain with Daniel and Ethan. Soft music played over the speakers. A tech assistant tested microphones. The announcer reviewed cue cards, and now he rehearsed. The visionary behind the Mercer expansion, Richard Mercer. I exhaled slowly. This wasn't revenge. This wasn't spectacle. This was reclamation. Ready? Ethan asked. I stared through the slit in the curtain. My father adjusted his tie, smiling at a board member in the audience. He looked untouchable. He looked certain. Good. Confidence makes the fall sharper. I'm ready, I said. Asterisk, the lights dimmed. The announcer took his place. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker. I stepped into the stage light before he could finish. The gasp was immediate. Like the room inhaled all at once. Hundreds of faces turned. Confusion flickered across the board members' expressions. Cameras shifted instantly, the red lights blinking alive. My father froze mid-step. What, Carolyn? His voice cracked, sharp with panic. You're not supposed to be here. I picked up a second microphone. My movements calm, steady, deliberate. Good morning, I said, my voice filling the hall. Silence stretched thin and electrified. This is inappropriate. My father snapped, his smile collapsing. You should not be on this stage. You are unwell. I lifted the folded note, the one he left beside my hospital bed. We stopped paying. Good luck. I held it up so the cameras could see. This, I said, is what my father left for me while I was unconscious. Murmurs rippled through the hall. Veronica shifted in her seat. Landon went still, his jaw tightening. And while I was in a coma, I continued. My father filed documents to declare me mentally incompetent. The room erupted, gasps, whispers, disbelief. Daniel stepped forward, placing the trust documents on the podium. Ethan cued the presentation. Slide 1, my mother's trust. Slide 2, the abandonment clause. Slide 3, ownership transfer triggered automatically. My mother protected me, I said softly, even when no one else did. My father lunged forward. You don't understand. No, I cut him off. You don't. The next slide lit up my work, my coding patterns, my architecture, my timelines, my metadata. Every project Landon had claimed. Every idea Richard praised him for, displayed, time-stamped, cross-verified . And then Ethan switched to the final image, Martin Cole's notebook. My contributions are not invisible, I said. You simply chose to look past them. A board member rose, voice steady. I move for an immediate vote of no confidence. Another board member stood. Seconded. Hands lifted across the room, almost unanimous. My father stared at them. Stunned, betrayed by the empire he'd built on lies. You can't do this. He shouted. You did this, I said quietly. The day you walked out of my hospital room, the vote passed. The applause that followed wasn't loud, it was unanimous. When I stepped off the stage, Daniel and Ethan walked beside me, but I didn't need their support. I wasn't weak. I wasn't erased. I wasn't small. I was seeing. And the summit that was supposed to celebrate my father. became the day he lost everything. Asterisk, the boardroom emptied slowly, as if the air itself needed time to adjust to what had just happened. Conversations drifted toward the elevator's low. Stunned, disbelieving murmurs about trust clauses, abandonment filings, metadata logs, and a daughter no one realized had been carrying the company on her back for years. I stood in the corridor behind the stage, the sounds of the summit fading into a distant hum. My hands were still trembling, not with fear, but with the kind of adrenaline that comes after surviving something enormous, something that tried to swallow you whole and failed. Daniel placed a steady hand on my shoulder. "It's done," he said quietly. "No," Ethan corrected, stepping to my other side. This was only the first step. They were both right, but for the first time since I opened my eyes in that hospital room, I felt like I was standing on solid ground. I wasn't disappearing. I wasn't erased. I wasn't powerless. I was the heir my mother intended me to be. Asterisk, hours later, security escorted my father, Veronica, and Landon out of the building through a side exit, standard procedure for executives removed by vote. But there was nothing standard about the sight of Richard Mercer, the man who once towered over every room. Walking out with his posture slumped for the first time in my life. He didn't meet my eyes as he passed. Veronica did, and the look she gave me wasn't hatred, it was fear, because she knew exactly what this meant. Her influence, her position, her security, gone. Every piece of power she clung to was built on my father's control, and just like that, it had dissolved. Landon lingered a moment, face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. Not guilt, not remorse, confusion, as if he still didn't understand how the world had shifted beneath him. His voice was small when he finally spoke. "Caroline, I didn't know." "Yes," I said softly. "You did. Maybe not the details, but the truth." He'd known that for years. He knew every night I worked alone, every time my ideas became his presentations, every moment I was pushed aside to make space for his ambition. He didn't respond. He just nodded slightly, swallowed hard, and followed our father out the door. And with that, the Mercer family split in two, not with shouting, but with silence, the same silence that shaped my childhood finally being used to end it. Asterisk. When the whirlwind of corporate politics died down, the board called an emergency meeting to restructure leadership. I expected resistance, hesitation, maybe a temporary seat while they assessed long-term suitability. Instead, they offered me my mother's title immediately: Chief Architect of Infrastructure and Acting Chair of Hayes Mercer Holdings. Room applauded as I accepted, but I didn't celebrate. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I simply breathed, the breath that felt like a lifetime earned after the meeting. Ethan walked with me through the glass sky bridge connecting the two wings of the hotel. The city below glittered in the cold evening light, the bay stretching out like a thin sheet of polished steel. "You didn't just survive," he said quietly. "You reclaimed something people tried very hard to bury." I looked down at the badge clipped to my coat, my mother's badge, the one she had prepared years before she died. "She knew," I whispered. "She trusted you," Ethan corrected gently, "even when no one else did." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The silence didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Asterisk, 2 days later, I took a flight back to Seattle, not for the company, not for the board, not even for closure. I went for the hospital. The same room where I had woken up alone, the same room where I'd stared at a folded note and felt the universe tilt in a direction I couldn't control when I stepped inside. The bed was made neatly, machines unplugged, lights dimmed. The silence was familiar but different now. I moved to the chair beside the window, the one where a parent should have sat while their daughter fought her way back to life. I came back. I whispered to the empty room. "Not because of them, but because of you." I placed my palm on the windowsill. The sky outside was pale, washed in grace, kind of Seattle morning my mother loved. "I took back what you protected," I murmured. "I put your company back where it belonged." A breath caught in my throat. Not grief. Not sadness. Recognition. For the first time since losing her, I felt her not as memory, but as presence. The quiet steadiness. The subtle weight of her hand guiding mine when I used to scribble code beside her desk. The way she always paused before speaking, choosing words that wouldn't diminish me. You didn't raise someone who would break, I whispered. You raised someone who would rebuild. A soft knock sounded at the door. The nurse peeked in. Are you okay? Yes, I said. For the first time, yes. Asterisk back at the office, minor tremors of change rippled everywhere. Departments reorganized. Teams reassigned. Landon moved to the analytics wing no corner office. No title, no special treatment. He avoided my gaze in the hallway, not out of bitterness. But shame. Veronica didn't return. My father left the state, and I stepped into the office on the top floor. The one with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the bay. My mother once watched while designing the company's first infrastructure map. Her sketch still hung on the wall, not framed in gold, not spotlit, just present, like she always was. I touched the edge of the paper gently. This time I said, I'll build it in my name. Behind me, Ethan cleared his throat. The board is asking when you'd like your first public statement. I turned to him tomorrow, I said. Today, I just want to breathe. He nodded, his expression softening. You deserve that. I walked to the window, letting the city stretch beneath me, alive, loud, unafraid. My reflection stared back, tired, recovering, but unbroken. I wasn't the girl in the storage closet anymore. I wasn't the shadow behind my brother's presentations. I wasn't the daughter my father abandoned. I was the woman who stood back up and reclaimed everything that should have been mine.